Good evening once again, everyone, and we welcome you to this special edition of Release It, a case of treating. This evening we have some very esteemed guests in our midst, and I want to start, of course, with attorneys at law, Miss Cara Shillingford from Dominica. Also with us, Miss Jackie McKenzie, who is presently in the United Kingdom, and Mr. Ruggles Ferguson. And of course, my co-host this evening, none other than my good friend and my colleague on Your Law and You, Mr. Joseph Layne. We are very pleased to have them in our presence this evening as we discuss the issue of treating. Now, treating is cited in our Representation of the People's Act, and of course under Election Offence Section 89, 1 and 2. Just before we get into it, it's a pleasure for me to welcome all our guests. Ladies, gentlemen, good evening and welcome to Release It.
Good evening. And thank you for the welcome.
Yes.
Thank you. Good evening. Good evening, Godfrey, and good evening, listeners and viewers.
Right. So before we get into it, now we started our promotion this week, and one of the confusions that came across, people were trying to determine whether we were talking about treating or cheating. And I think we should start by first explaining to our listeners and viewers what treating really is. So let's start with Mr. Ruggles Ferguson. Mr. Ferguson, explain to us in law what we mean by treating, so that our viewers and listeners understand what we're talking about.
Okay. Yes. Thank you, Godfrey. Treating, it sounds close to cheating, but treating is the specific offense created under the Representation of the People's Act, Representation of the People Act. And so it is a specific offense. It's named treating, and it is defined by Section 89 of the Act. And there are some very important elements in the definition, and probably we can hear how the Act defines it, because it's not, when we are dealing with these legal issues, it's not what we perceive to be treating, and what the general dictionary definition you may find of treating is. But specifically, what the Act says it is. Legal issues. And the Act says specifically that every person who corruptly, so this is one of the first qualifying words in the section, every person who corruptly, by himself or herself, or by any other person, either before, during, or after an election, directly or indirectly, gives or provides or pays wholly or in part the expenses, and we come into now the qualifying components of the offense. It pays in part or wholly the expenses of giving or providing any 1, food, 2, drink, 3, entertainment, or provision to or for any person for the purpose of corruptly influencing that person or any other person to vote or to refrain from voting at such elections, or on account of such person or any other person having voted or refrained from voting at such elections. And I think because the theme for this evening is treating, it's important to get the full definition. But to put simply, no, really and truly, it is corruptly influencing somebody either to 1, vote, or 2, not vote by providing food, drink, and entertainment. So it's not just influencing, but corruptly influencing. And it is also important that the other element of the offense is it's not just a person by himself or another person, but the second part of the definition focuses on every voter now. Every voter who corruptly or accepts or takes any food, drink, entertainment, or provision shall also be guilty of the offense of treating, of course, after being charged and being subjected to a proper trial before a competent court of law. So it goes both for the giver
and the receiver. All right, thank you very much. I want to go to Ms. Shillingford. Presently, there is a case in Dominica of treating. I think you are very instrumental in that case. Now that we understand what treating is, can you brief us on what actually happened in Dominica and how that issue of treating came about?
Okay, good evening once again. So as you correctly said, currently there is a matter before the magistrate court in Dominica that concerns treating, which, as Ruggles said, it's a criminal offense or an election offense. In 2014, general elections were held in Dominica. Prior to the general elections, the Dominican Labour Party, through large concerts, brought in foreign artists to perform at those concerts and so on. Now, following the elections, 3 gentlemen, that is Mervyn John Baptist, Ellen Senval, and the late Antoine Defoe, 3 of them went to the magistrates court and filed private criminal complaints against members of the Labour Party who ran during that election. And that complaint was that those Labour Party candidates committed acts of treating during the election. Now, when the 3 gentlemen went to the magistrate court, there was some back and forth or some question as to whether the magistrate court should accept these complaints. Now, under the laws of Dominica, I'm not certain if it's the same thing in Grenada, but under the laws of Dominica, private citizens are able to file criminal complaints, and we call it private criminal prosecutions. Just as the police is able to file a complaint against someone, saying to the court that this person has committed a criminal offense, a private citizen is able to do that as well. If that citizen feels that a criminal offense has been committed, and for whatever reason, the police isn't doing what they're supposed to do. So after the complaint was filed, the magistrates issued summons to the defendants so that they would attend court and answer to the charge, which is a normal process. A complaint is filed, the magistrate must summon you, must tell you, come to court, order you to come to court. Now, the defendants, that is these Dominican Labour Party representatives, felt that the magistrate did not have the jurisdiction to summon them to court. And as a result of that, they filed judicial review proceedings, asking the High Court to, 1, stay the proceedings in the magistrate court, that is to prevent the magistrate from hearing the case, and 2, to declare that the magistrate acted ultra vires or outside his jurisdiction. And so to basically, they were asking the High Court to prevent the magistrate from hearing the case so that they could, they wouldn't have to attend court and answer any case. So the High Court judge actually ruled in their favor and ordered the magistrate to dismiss the case or declared that the magistrate did not have jurisdiction. We felt very strongly that this was a wrong decision. We felt that it cannot be that the laws of Dominica creates a criminal offense an electoral offence, and that this electoral offence can only apply to, us, the ordinary persons, and that these elected representatives are somehow exempted, that they have immunity, when they are the very persons who stand to benefit the most from election offences. So for that reason, we appealed to the Court of Appeal, and there was a majority decision in our favour. So the majority ruled in our favour, and the appeal was allowed. Now, the respondents were unsatisfied with the Court of Appeal decision, and so they appealed to the CCG. And at the CCG, a unanimous decision was delivered by the full court in our favour, and their appeal was dismissed. So basically, the issue in this Dominican case that was before the Caribbean Court of Justice was whether the magistrate had the jurisdiction to hear a complaint of treating made against elected representatives. And the answer to that question by the CCG, yes, the magistrate has jurisdiction to hear this.
Okay.
So that is what it was about in a nutshell. So right now, the matter is back before the magistrate court, and it is expected that the magistrate court would hear the evidence and then deliver a verdict.
Okay. Right. Thank you, Cara. Let's go to Jackie. Jackie, you've heard Ruggles, you've heard Cara. In the UK, give us a perspective on this whole issue of treating from a UK perspective and based on what you've heard from our two attorneys.
I think the concept of treating is something peculiar to the Caribbean region and maybe other parts of the world, but it's certainly not something that we have here in the UK. What we have, very similar to what the two speakers have spoken of before, we have also a representation of the People's Act, but we've got later legislation, we always get the name wrong, so I'm actually going to read it. The Political Parties Election Referendum Act of 2000, which actually brought in a measure that sort of deals with things like treating. So that is that spending during elections and on campaigns, whether it's in referendums or whether it's on parliamentary elections or somebody trying to become an MP for a by-election, even at a local government level, spending is very rigidly controlled. The formula for working out how much somebody could spend is quite difficult and would take me hours to go through because it depends on the size of the constituency. So, for instance, we've got constituencies, we have 650 of them. We've got some constituencies with 20,000 people in them, perhaps in rural areas, and constituencies in the more urban, developed areas of 100,000 people. So what you can spend on an election or any election campaign is predicated on the size of your constituency, and it's very, very rigidly controlled by the Electoral Commission. So returning officers, even if you've paid for an artist, a reggae artist, to come in and sing, or if you've paid for, I don't know, a meal somewhere, it's all allowed so long as you keep within your budget. And I suppose there is the distinction, as Ruggles made, in terms of whether you're trying to do something corruptly or whether you're just simply entertaining. And I'd like to come back later on, hopefully, if there's time, to talk about how I perceive the imbalance of power in Grenada elections, which I think is quite worrying and could possibly lead to a situation where it is possible to buy an election on the basis of who has more money to spend. But that's not what we're talking about here. So we have legislation. It determines what you can spend. You've got to send in every single receipt pertaining to your campaign to the Electoral Commission. They don't have the power to do much other than to report it to the police, who then report it to the Crown Prosecution Service. So it's very formulaic. But what we do have in the UK, which I doubt the region has, is an army of people, academics, journalists, busybodies in the community, who do not let this go. So if you had a bus on the street somewhere with your face on it, and you forgot to add that to your list of things that you've got to send in to the returning officer, somebody somewhere is going to pick up on it. So we don't therefore have many problems. We don't have many prosecutions. There are a whole range of matters at the moment with the CPS arising from the last election with the Conservative Party. I'm not being party political here, but it is with them. They've admitted it. We do not expect any criminal prosecutions to proceed any further than they've admitted it. Rap on the knuckle. There is a fine, £20,000 maximum fine for a breach. It's a criminal conviction offence, so you could also go to prison. Not heard of that happen yet. It's legislation. It only came in 2000, so it's only 20 years old, 21 years, coming up to 21 years old, but it's rigid. You've got to account for it, and you can't get away with it because there will be somebody in some organisation who will be looking at you as a particular candidate and will account. And that's how we control spending, because it's absolutely clear that this is a problem area, and that's why the legislation came in 2000. You can buy an election. So on the right, we have parties that are very well funded, and were, there was all sorts of things going on around lobbying with Conservatives and parties, centre-right parties and parties to the right prior to this legislation. But also on the left, you've got the trade unions, and the trade unions in the UK are very rich organisations, and so they would fund centre-left and left. And then you get fringe organisations like Greens, women's parties, black rights organisations, who have no them. And so you have an imbalance of power, and now there is supposed to be a level playing field. Whether that happens in reality is a different matter, because although you've got to put your chitties in of what you've spent, we know that these things happen in a more nebulous way than that, in terms of airtime, how you use that airtime, who are your antagonists and protagonists and how they use their airtime. The complex issue that I think some of the region got into trouble with around the use of social media with Cambridge Analytica, there are more complex issues and more nuances now. But the way I think we do it in the UK, with a control over spending, I think will limit some of the issues. It then won't matter if the fact that you've put some Caribbeans down in the Woburn Crossroad or an ice cream ban, as I saw, because I happened to be in Grenada for the last election, and I saw all of that going on, and T-shirts, and I was just collecting up all the gifts. I was having a great time. Everybody was giving away stuff, and I was grabbing them. Didn't care who they were from. Now, whether that's corrupt or not, it would be irrelevant. If you have a policy or rules or a piece of legislation that says you can spend 10,000 and you can only spend 10,000.
Okay, thank you, Jackie. So I want to bring in my co-host now, Mr. Layne. You've heard all three esteemed attorneys on the issue of treating. I'm sure you have a couple of questions you want to put to them as we get deeper and explain to our listeners and viewers this whole issue of treating, in relation to election offences. You're still muted. Can you unmute? Yes. Mm-hmm.
I just, by way of a question, to Cara, is it that the issue, or one of the principal issues in the matter out of Dominica, was the contention that you are in effect giving the magistrate the power or the jurisdiction, the authority to determine who sits and who does not sit in the House, that it could amount to that? Because I think one of the consequences of a conviction is that you can lose your seat in Parliament if you are elected.
Cara?
Okay. Well, that is one of the questions that were raised, and that is what the respondents actually argued in the case. So they are currently, I refer to them as the defendants. So that's what they argued. But no, the answer is no. Because at the end of the day, the law is the law. If it is that a criminal offense has been committed, then that person must suffer the consequences of the criminal offense. And, you cannot blame the magistrate. It's not the magistrate who has the authority of determining who sits in the house. It is the individual, because at the end of the day, if an individual does something wrong, then, they have to face the consequences. Similarly, if that individual were to fall into bankruptcy and the court were to declare that person as a bankrupt, then, that person would similarly lose their seat, have to leave the house. If that person becomes a lunatic, that person cannot continue sitting in the house under our constitution. But the magistrate isn't the sole person determining the issue, because there is a right of appeal. If the defendants are not satisfied with the decision of the magistrate, they can appeal to the Court of Appeal. If they're not satisfied with the decision of the Court of Appeal, they can appeal further to the Caribbean Court of Justice. But at the end of the day, the judiciary has a responsibility to ensure that the laws are respected by whichever person comes before it. That is a point that I think is extremely important, because, in our Caribbean society, we have this notion that the executive in a democracy should be all powerful, and the prime minister and so on should have very great powers, absolute power. I believe that what would really strengthen a democracy is if the institutions, such as the court, can operate well and can remain strong regardless of who is in power, so that, regardless of whoever it is, whichever party they're part of, if that person committed an offense and the matter is taken before the court, then the matter will be heard. The person would be given, their right to representation, their right to be heard, etc., opportunity to defend, and a fair and balanced court would deliver a decision. So that is what would create a stronger society if these institutions perform their task as they're supposed to.
Okay, thank you very much, Cara. So we're going to take our first commercial break now. When we come back, we're going to get a little deeper into the whole issue. I want to get Ruggles to speak on some of the issues here in Grenada and whether or not they can be classified as treating. And of course, we can look at the consequences and so on. So we take a short break. We'll be back with you in just a moment. Do stay with us.
Release it, 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 release it. Just release it, 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 release it.
Get high making money moves with the NLA's new Aces High Scratch game with 4 chances to win. Beat the dealer's card to win the prize shown. Reveal an A symbol. And just like that, you are automatically a winner. Scratch away to win the top prize of $10,000. Win easy with Scratch. Must be 18 or older to play.
Good evening and welcome viewers and listeners. It's time for the National Lottery Authority's Daily Pick 3 evening draw for today, Wednesday, the 12th of May, 2021. I'm Lexanne Fletcher and I'll be your draw hostess for this evening. Joining me is Ms. Makiba Bain. She's representing PK of Accountants and Business Advisors. Ms. Bain is here to ensure the games for this evening are conducted in a fair and accountable manner, and that the game balls have not been tampered with and are within industry standards. Don't forget, with the Pick 3 game, you can bet as little as $1 on inline, mix, and pair tickets, and from $2 on backup tickets. Let's find out what the winning numbers will be for this evening. It pays to play. Good luck. All right, check your tickets, check the screen. First number is, first number 2. Second number 7, third and final. Third and final is 5. Let's recap. First number was 2. The second number 7, third and final 5. Congratulations if you're a winner this evening, and do stay tuned. We've got the cash for draw coming up right after this. We'll see you then.
Tick, tock, 2. I win. Feel like a big kid again when you play NLA's new scratch game, Tic-Tac-Toe. It's instant cash on the go. Reveal 3 X's or 3 O's in the same row, column, or diagonally, and win the prizes shown, or as much as $5,000. Win easy with Scratch. Must be 18 or older to play. Tic-Tac-Toe, please.
Give me a tic-tac-toe, please.
Tic-Tac-Toe, please.
Welcome back. It's time for the daily cash for a draw for this evening, Wednesday, the 12th of May, 2021. I've got Miss Makiba Bain with me once again. She's representing PKF Accountants and Business Advisors. A quick reminder with the cash for a game, you can bet as little as $1 on most of the bet types with the exception of backup, in which case you bet $2. Let's find out what the winning numbers will be for this evening. It's more plays, bigger prizes. Good luck. First number up is 2. Second number 1. Third number 8, and the fourth. Yes, fourth and final is 1. Of course, we got to recap. First number up was 2. The second number 1. Third number up was 8. And the fourth and final 1. Congratulations if you're a winner this evening. We've got the Playway draw coming up next, so get those tickets out. We'll see you then.
Win more with the NLA's Daily Cash 4. Every day with more plays and bigger prizes to be won. It's a 4-digit game with all the bet types you already know and much, much more. From 0000 to 9999. Choose your 4 numbers and place your bet from 11 different bet types. Choose from inline, 4 different mixes, first 3, last 3, and 4 different backup options too. Best of all, it starts at just $1, except for backups, which starts at $2. Win as much as $5,000 with a $1 inline bet and as much as $6,200 in a $2 backup bet. Imagine $50,000 for a winning $10 inline bet. There's definitely more to win with the Daily Cash 4. More plays, bigger prizes, twice per day, Mondays to Saturdays. Must be 18 and over to participate. NLA, making your dreams come true while supporting sports, culture, and nation building.
Welcome back. It's time for the Playway draw for this evening, Wednesday, the 12th of May, 2021. Miss Makiba Bain is standing in with me once again. She's representing PKF Accountants and Business Advisors. Here's a reminder with the Playway game, all you got to do is bet as little as $1 up to $10 on increments and any number or dream symbol of your choice and get to win 24 times the amount you bet. That's $24 for every dollar spent. Let's find out what the winning Playway number will be for this evening. Value your dreams, win your way with Playway. Good luck. All right, check your tickets. The winning Playway number is... The winning Playway number for this evening is 20. That's 2020. The dream symbol is belly. Just to remind you again, just to recap, the Playway number for this evening, 20, and the dream symbol is belly. Congratulations if you're a winner this evening. Of course, don't forget, it's Wednesday. Hope you've got your lotto tickets for later on. The estimated jackpot is $44,000. We'll see you then.
I'm a winner, you are winner, we are winners, winners.
It's the big one. Grenada. Imagine winning $25,000 and up to 6 times by scratching just one little ticket. Get your triple cash scratch tickets for a chance to live your best life. Win easy with Scratch. For just $3, match any of your numbers to any of the winning numbers and win the prize shown for that number. Reveal a money back symbol and win the prize instantly. Triple cash scratch. In stores now. Must be 18 or older to play.
'Cause I'm a winner. From the moment that I get up, I'm feeling right.
What I miss the most about life before COVID-19
I miss the freedom of living.
I miss being able to connect on a very personal level. You know how we are as a people, welcoming and everything. I really miss that.
That physical contact, I miss having good hugs.
I'm what you call a chiller. So I miss the chilling part, where we stay out until 3, 4 in the morning just talking anywhere. We just pack up anywhere and just talk. I miss that.
That freedom extended to you where you don't have to worry about what time to go home, who to share a glass with, and
Regular life, I would say I miss the option to be free. And when I say free, I mean decide whatever time to do whatever I want with no, body blocking the road and that kind of thing.
As it pertains to music and performing, the thing I miss the most is that personal connection with the fans. I always look forward to at least getting some dabs from my fans while you're performing. Going out and spreading my music, spreading the love out there to fans abroad and also here in Grenada.
I miss the big crowd. I miss the Mardi Gras. I miss Soca Monarch. I miss everything about that. I miss the energies, and I can't wait till they open back the country and we could have that. And I know it's just not me speaking on this. Everybody, I can't wait.
Being able to travel again, to reconnect. I'm looking forward to the reconnection and how exciting that would be.
I look forward to having my kids being able to socialize better. Virtual schooling is really challenging, and that's my main concern, the educational part of it.
The most challenging part of this is, for me, I would say the economic aspect of it. Being able to work as an artist and being able to make money basically, and the transitioning from being someone that is always up and about to someone that is just home. It was kind of difficult, but just took a little adjusting. I just want to encourage each and every one of you to seek information, try to be as educated as possible on, the COVID-19 and seek information on the vaccination and all that.
To find out more about the COVID-19 vaccine, log on to covid19.gov.gd.
Or you can consult with a medical health professional. Stay COVID smart.
Keep strong. Keep mentally strong and keep the love flowing. Be COVID-19 smart.
Welcome back, folks. It's a special edition of Release It, and we are talking about a case of treating. I want to go now to Mr. Ruggles Ferguson. Mr. Ferguson, we have a lot of traditions in the Caribbean, a lot of traditions, and we know them, just off the back of our hand. Is treating one of the traditions that we have? Because as far back as I can remember, I have seen some of the things that have been spoken about earlier, and also in your, explanation of what treating is, we've seen it happen. Is it a tradition in Grenada or in the Caribbean?
Well, certainly, again, Godfrey, we have to be careful here because in the context of the act, it's corruptly given and corruptly receiving. So what is common, I believe, and the cultural aspect of it is extremely important, because the centerpiece of activities, whether they be sporting activities, cultural activities, political activities, or other activities, would be food, drink, and entertainment, some element of it, even whether it's just a lecture, because it's part and parcel of the culture. And it's capable to draw more people when there is food and drink and entertainment. people generally feel the activity is dry. It's a dry mouth activity you have it. And in our political culture over the years, food, drink, and entertainment have always been critical in an election period by both opposition, by all candidates, as a matter of fact, particularly the main opposition party and the ruling party. The only difference is the extent of it. Even, I remember one election, in fact, there was a candidate being referred to as pot of food there, and you're cooking food and you're going through the communities, and it's part of attracting people to engage, because you need people around. If you are to engage, you go on the blocks and to speak to folks on the blocks and to capture their attention. You may need some food and drink and entertainment. Whether or not, again, that amounts to corruption, because it is, and there's really a fine line, and that is the significance of this particular judgment, because there's a fine line now in defining whether or not it is corrupt, or whether or not there is another purpose behind it, because it becomes subjective. No matter how you take it, it's like for a criminal offense, unlike a civil offense, for a criminal offense, there are two elements, as it says, the mens rea and the actus reus. The actus reus is the act itself. So the act itself will be the entertainment, the food, the drink, the mens rea. And you have to prove both elements in a criminal matter, would be whether or not the intention here was corrupt, or whether or not it was simply otherwise, just to, bring people together, but not to go so far as to say, well, make sure you vote for me, I've given you this, and make sure you vote for me. So it's really an important issue. I must say that the relevant sections of the Representation of the People Act in Dominica, or the Election Act, is similar, almost identical for treating. The definition of treating in Dominica is identical to the definition of treating in Grenada. Cara might be able to correct me, but I think what differs is the punishment. In fact, in Grenada, I see on summary conviction, and anytime you see summary conviction, it is triable and determined in the magistrate's court only. There's a fine of $2,400, imprisonment for 2 years, or both. So I believe I saw somewhere that in Dominica is 6 months. 6 months imprisonment is the maximum. I'm subject to correction there. Mm-hmm. But in relation to now, similarly as Dominica, in Grenada, now if you are convicted of treating or personation, as they call it, undue influence, then for a period of 7 years, you can't be registered as a voter. You're basically banned from voting, and you are disqualified from being a member of the House. Okay. So it is a serious development, and it can operate either way.
All right, I want to go back to Jackie. Ruggles just said it has to be proven, and that there's a very thin line, between these issues. But let's look at it this way. In Grenada, a political party is elected to serve for 5 years. That's the term of office. Within that 5 years, you may have a convention probably once a year and your general council. Rarely do you find or do you see a political party here in Grenada holding these mass rallies and putting on these events and so on? But at election time, when campaign is on, I mean, all of these things happen because normally you don't see them spending that kind of monies. But I mean, we know, for example, to bring a Jamaican artist to perform somewhere, it's no small money. We're talking thousands of US dollars. So, you know, how does it happen? Why does it happen? And why is it that at other times it is not done, and then at election time when these extremes take place, why can it not be considered treating, considering the definition as cited by the Act?
Yes. Who knows? I don't know what's in the minds of the people behind all the political parties and why they do what they do, but I'll tell you what my thoughts on it are. I think that I'm very cynical about it. I know that there are real serious problems in trying to reach definitions within the law around intent, an act, and etc. However, I think you answered the question yourself when you said, well, they don't do it any other time, do they? They do it around election time. So what are they doing it for? It's quite obvious that they're doing it to buy votes. And it's not just the stuff on the street, you know, around the election. So, you know, the food or the drinks, and you have plentiful. And you're right, it's cultural, it's perennial. I mean, I come from a family of shopkeepers, and I remember, you know, I lived in the constituency that was Gary's constituency, and the shops in Woburn did better during election time than they did at Christmas because he put money behind the till. And was it the smokes and salt? What was it? Saltfish and smoke herring or whatever. Crick's biscuits and all those sorts of things, you know, you sold out of it because, you know, that's how it was done. So it is cultural. But it's extremely problematic, I think, because some organisations, some political organisations, have much more money. And the street fetes aside, and I want to come back very briefly in a bit to the street fetes and what's another problem with that. There's also another thing that's going on. So in the last election, as I said, I happened to be in Grenada, and I saw a picture on Facebook of a woman who was dressed head to toe in the colours of one of the political parties. And I won't say which colour, because I'm not here to sort of have a go at any party. Because I think whoever has the means will do exactly the same thing in order to capture the votes, which is what people are trying to do, whether they use the internet and organisations like Cambridge Analytica, or whether it's the ice cream van and the carrot truck down the road, they're trying to capture the votes. This one was dressed head to toe in these colours, including lipstick in the same colour and nail polish in the same. And I'd never seen it before, and it was something that I'd come to know. So I rang her up because I wanted to understand what would cause somebody to do that. And she was able to tell me wherever she lives, and it was somewhere in one of the northern parishes, St Andrew, or the eastern side. I'm get Grenada wrong way around in my head sometimes. But she has a problem with getting to the road from her front door, and the local politician there was able to sort it and put a piece of concrete across the road, so now she doesn't get wet. She's not walking through what is effectively a river. So I then engaged her because she knew nothing else about the elections other than that. She didn't know who stood for what the ideology of anybody was, what the policies was of anybody was. Didn't care, got that little piece of road. Now, she had children at school, one coming up post-tertiary education, wanting to go abroad to study, problems with scholarships. And when we got into a discussion, and I said, well, which party is dealing with this issue on education? Her husband was very ill. Which party is thinking about a possible national health program, given how bad the healthcare system in Grenada is at both primary and secondary level? And she didn't know, but it got her thinking. And in that dialogue with her and her children, they started to think, and I now have loads and loads of conversations with them, and I know that their thinking has shifted and they're now interested in the issues. But if all we're doing is giving people bits of galvanites and bits of breeze block and building little bits of walkway for them, or having the ice cream truck, or we're not really engaging them in the democratic process. They're not involved in the issues. One of the events that I attended with one of the parties at the Woburn Cliff, the politician who put on that event sat on the stage and had their head down. Don't want to identify anybody by pronouns either, but had their head down in a mobile phone for the entire event. But there was music blaring and there was a truck with soft drinks and beers and so on. And it was a party. It was an absolute party. How are we really engaging people in the process of thought and discussion? That's one issue about it. But the other issue is people, we're humans, and people are going to gravitate to where they think their interest lies, and they're seeing those interests very short term. I've now got my walkway. I've got a bag full of different T-shirts. Whatever else you've gotten, but what about the long term? And I think it's problematic, and I do really think it's problematic for the reasons that Ruggles said in terms of how do you prove what people are doing, and because you can't, and because things are so surreptitious and so easy to get around and do in other ways, particularly with social media, how do you value that? Then I think that really and truly the time has come to really determine two things. Where is the money coming from that's being spent on elections? You should have to identify that. In the UK, you have to identify every donation to your party over £50. I think we should have limits on how much you can spend. Right. Otherwise, you don't have democracy at all.
Okay, thank you, Jackie. Mr. Layne, you want to jump in here? Quite a lot has been said. We need to unmute. We need to unmute there a bit.
Just returning to Cara, I just wanted to understand her point, because I put the point of view of the opposition, the defendants of the matter. Namely, they are saying that, listen, you are essentially, the Constitution puts jurisdiction in the hands of the High Court solely to determine election issues, to determine if somebody should sit in the House of Parliament or not, if somebody is properly elected or not. And the argument was that, listen, what that law is doing in the way it is being used is to have a parallel structure, namely with the magistrate court, that an election petition has to be brought within 21 days, but you can bring in Dominica, you can bring the complaint before the magistrate within 6 months. But I understand Cara's answer to that is to say that, listen, there are several different ways, there are several different avenues, there are several different reasons that someone can be removed from Parliament. She mentioned bankruptcy. I think the Constitution itself mentions that. You can be imprisoned for offense if you're in prison for a particular period. I think in excess of 12 months, that could also be the consequence. But I think it's a very powerful argument, the one, because I had listened to the case in the CCJ also, and the equality before the law argument is an extremely powerful argument in my view. And also the fact that, which I know was very persuasive in the Court of Appeal, that, listen, it is not only that piece of legislation that will result in somebody being disqualified from Parliament, that it is not only that piece of legislation that provides for that. I think, however, the check and balance which Cara mentioned is the fact that the process could be very long. And I suspect that within a 5-year period, the way our courts work in the Caribbean, even though you convict somebody, the 5 years will pass before, if the person is elected, most likely the 5 years will pass before you get a final determination. And correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is only when there is a final determination that the person must actually vacate the seat. Am I correct on that?
Well, There is a provision in the Constitution that speaks to the right to appeal. I'm just trying to get the exact section because it's very specific. Okay, so it's section 35(4), I believe. And if I may I don't usually like reading on this kind of programs, but I just want to capture it exactly as it is. So section 35(4) of the Constitution speaks about when a member shall vacate his seat. And one of those situations where the member must vacate his seat is if he is convicted of an election offense. So it goes on to say, if any circumstances such as are referred to in paragraph C of subsection 3 of this section arise because any member is on the sentence of death or imprisonment, adjudged to be of unsound mind, declared bankrupt, or convicted or reported guilty of an offense related to elections, and if it is open to the member to appeal against the decision, either with the leave of a court of law or other authority or without such leave, he shall forthwith cease to perform his function as a member. But, subject to the provisions of this section, he shall not vacate his seat until the expiration of a period of 30 days thereafter. Right, so that is if he appeals. Now it continues, providing that the Speaker may, at the request of the member, from time to time, extend that period for further periods of 30 days to enable the member to pursue an appeal against the decision. So, however, that extensions of time exceeding in aggregate 150 days shall not be given without the approval signified by resolution of the House. So yes, the member has to cease from performing functions as a member. But if he is appealing, and if the House approves, he would not vacate his seat until the matter is determined by the final court.
Okay.
Until the appeal options are exhausted.
Right. I want to put one to Ruggles just before we go to our final break. Mr. Ferguson, in the definition of treating, it speaks to things like food, drink, entertainment, and stuff like that. In the case of making false promises, and for example, there are issues where, for example, the roads in a constituency might be bad for 5 years or 4.5 years, and once the election campaign hits up, you might find the ruling party, they start fixing all roads, they start doing everything like they're crazy. All right, all of these things. I also want to include into that the issue of, and we've heard of it, money in t-shirts, all of these things, but specifically promises that are made during election campaign. I mean, and we're talking here about promises that can actually change people's lives forever. Take them from the bottom and bring them to the top. For example, the finding of oil and gas. Promises like that, can they be classified as treating? And I'm saying with because of where it is done and how it is done.
Right. No, I think treating is limited. The offense of treating is limited to inducing someone to vote or not to vote. Just put simply, to vote or not to vote. And that is by using material inducements, using, again, and material, everything, food, drink, entertainment, there. So it is...
Money in jerseys?
Limited to that, but whatever is material, money, The question of money, again, there are other election offenses, for example, bribery. And that might fall, the issue of money might fall, I think will fall under bribery.
Right.
But remember, because if failure to fulfill a promise made at election was an offense, Godfrey, then all politicians all over the world will be convicted of offenses.
Well, they'd have to be taken to court first.
Right, but the issue in dealing with that is the question of, again, if promises are made, promises not kept, then is a question of whether or not the next time around, somebody is elected, the representative is elected. In other words, that's the way to deal with this issue. Now, remember, we're dealing here with offenses, and offenses relate to criminal offenses. So not every infraction, for example, is a criminal offense. Not every wrong is, you have civil wrongs and you have criminal wrongs. Criminal wrongs are tried as criminal offenses in a court, and you have punishment resulting, either fines, imprisonment, or otherwise. So I don't think that will, a promise, again, to deal with these matters. And our courts, remember, our courts are already overwhelmed with, several different matters. And again, because of the nature of politics, and is an issue even on the question of treating, this judgment, for example, can open the door because it was always there, by the way. It was always there. I believe, again, persons like Cara, full of energy and drive and love to challenge issues constitutionally and otherwise, then, the full import of this is facing us in a stark way, because really what it means, Cara, and that was argued, though unsuccessfully, it really means, in truth and in fact, stripped simply of the fact, when it comes down to all the lean, it means that a magistrate who hears and determines summary matters in the court, not even a high court judge, can determine the fate of an elected politician. That is what it comes down to in effect. And how it's done if a complaint is made and that person is found guilty. And the other aspect of it is that the complaint can be made by a private individual. So not even the regular criminal complaint through the prosecution, a private individual. And we know the nature of elections. So in elections, it's all about votes, it's all about seats, and every party is vying for office. So, and as we see, after every election, there's controversy. After every election, we hear all kinds of different things. So, what it means is that a private individual can make a complaint, not a complaint, can file a summons, as Cara said, file a summons in the magistrate's court, and you can have then as a result of that, a criminal process is triggered. As a result of that, you can have a trial and a conviction. And here is where the CCJ and the courts made the fine distinction. Because they're saying, listen, the magistrate is not determining whether the person could sit in Parliament. What the magistrate is determining is a criminal offense before him or her, and determining whether the person is guilty of the criminal offense. However, the law is structured in a way that if you're found guilty of the criminal offense now, then you automatically, by operation of law, you automatically are removed. You are automatically removed from as a member of the House. But indirectly, that is what it really amounts to. And if you have people who are politically, and you know, these small societies, then you know, and again, it creates issues for both the opposition and the ruling party, because the opposition might get 2 seats in Parliament, and somebody say, well, hey, you know, this opposition member could cook one big pot of food there and giving out free food. And as Jackie said, you know, one of the questions you'll ask is, really, when last you cook a pot of food? Yeah, 5 years ago, right? So that question alone can do it.
All right. Okay, so let's so we're going to take our final commercial break. After that, we're going to continue discussion, and we're going to invite our listeners. You know, if they have any questions or comments, they will be able to do so. So stay with us. We take our final break, and we come right back.
When you need your stress, a lot of problem, they on your chest.
I'm a winner, you are winner, we are winners, winners.
It's the big one. Grenada. Imagine winning $25,000 and up to 6 times by scratching just one little ticket. Get your triple cash scratch tickets for a chance to live your best life. Win easy with Scratch. For just $3, match any of your numbers to any of the winning numbers and win the prize shown for that number. Reveal a money back symbol and win the prize instantly. Triple cash scratch in stores now. Must be 18 or older to play.
Cause I'm a winner. From the moment that I get up, I'm feeling right.
Good evening, viewers and listeners. Welcome back. It's time for the National Lottery Authority's Lotto draw number 3211 for this evening, Wednesday, the 12th of May, 2021. The estimated jackpot is $44,000. Joining me once again, Ms. Makiba Bain. She's representing PKF Accountants and Business Advisors. Well, as per usual, I'll select firstly the free ticket letter. Good luck. And this evening's free ticket letter is... This evening's free ticket letter is the letter F as in free. That's F as in free. And it's time to select tonight's 5 winning numbers for $44,000. Good luck. Screen. First number 28. Second number 14. Third number 8. The fourth number is 10, and the fifth and final 11. Of course, we got to do a quick recap. Double check those tickets carefully. Free ticket letter. That letter was F as in free. That's F as in free. And the 5 winning numbers for $44,000. Let's recap starting from number 1. The first number, 28, 2828. The second number was 14, 1414. Third number, 8, 088. The fourth was 10, 1010. And the fifth and final was 11. That's 1111. This has been Lotto Play and Win a Lot. You've got these numbers. Big hearty congratulations to you. Well, don't forget, you've got another chance. Do get your tickets tomorrow and continue to support sports, culture, and nation building. Have a good night.
Buy By now, you should know that the early bird catches the worm. So, what are you waiting for? Put wings to your feet and head to your nearest scratch seller. For every Quick 7's scratch ticket you buy at $2, the NLA gives you 7 chances at winning as much as $7,000. Scratch the entire play area for your 7 chances at revealing as much 7s and win the corresponding prizes. Win easy with Scratch. Must be 18 or older to play.
A message by the Grenada Distillers Limited.
You want a hand sanitizer to do 3 things: kill germs, be gentle, and to go where you go. You can get all of that in our hand sanitizer. Hard on germs, gentle on hands, affordable. Remember, hand sanitizers contain alcohol. Keep away from heat and flames and avoid contact with eyes. Available at retailers island-wide.
A message by the Grenada Distillers Limited.
Level of convenience and comfort awaits you when you shop at Rise and Shine Supermarket and Hardware Supplies, Griffin Lane, Grenville. Convenient, because we are open from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. Sunday to Sunday. We're even at your service on public holidays. Comfort, because we are easily accessible to the physically challenged. Free Wi-Fi is available while you shop, and bags come at no charge. Everyday low prices and excellent customer care. Adequate parking available. We supply everything you can possibly think of. Family and home supplies, fresh meat, vegetables, and personal care products. All brands of cooking gas at affordable prices. Plumbing fixtures, cutting and grinding discs, PVC glue, drywall screws, and power saw blades. You can send in your order, have it pulled, or pick up express.
We shall fight them on the beaches. We shall defend our islands and our oceans. To rid our waterways of plastic and other marine litter. We shall fight in the mountains, the valleys, on the coastline. We shall never surrender until every home on every street in our cities, towns, and villages in the OECS learn to reuse, reduce, and recycle plastic and prevent the pollution of our beloved ocean. We shall fight marine litter together with our sports clubs, our churches, the private sector, our schools. Join the fight. We shall never surrender.
This message is brought to you by the OECS Commission with funding from the Government of Norway. Remlit, tackling ocean pollution from tooth to sooth.
You under pressure, you under stress, a lot of problem. They on your chest. You under pressure, you under stress, a lot of problem. They on your chest. Release it, 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 release it.
Welcome back, folks. It's Release It. And we have a couple comments and questions on our Facebook platform. Let me just share a few. Someone is asking, they said that's what political parties do at all times. When it's election, everyone's table is full. After election, everyone's hungry. Someone is asking, so Mr. Ferguson, is it safe to say that political parties in Grenada have been operating in a manner that places them to be categorized as treating? And someone is also asking which one of our local attorneys are willing to challenge these issues. That's just a few of the comments on Facebook. But I want to bring in my co-host, Mr. Layne, and to maybe throw some questions out there and to make some comments of his own on the issue as we are discussing now.
Okay, I have one comment and a question. The comment is along the lines that Ruggles mentioned, that there is also Section 88 of the Act in Grenada. In Dominica, they went on the issue of treating, and we know treating, as was explained, as giving food and entertainment and so. Bribery is straight giving money or other assets. So there's also the provision of dealing with bribery, and it is structured similar to the way the treating provision is structured. My question now is to
just before you go, Mr. Layne, let me just ask you this quickly. So what differentiates bribery from treating?
Well, I gather from it, if you read the definition, bribery deals with giving money or giving things that is really material things money is what? Material, building material, and so on and so forth.
Right.
Treating really deals with, I would say, things of less value, some food, providing entertainment and so, but the intent must be this, it must be corrupt, and the intention is really to
win votes.
Exactly.
Okay.
Or to have people refrain from voting.
Right. So your question?
The question is, again, generally to Ruggles, to anyone, but most of the Cara. My question is, what are the powers of the DPP in these circumstances, and is there any reason for concern regarding what those powers may or may not be?
Okay. Well, I would like to start by saying that elected politicians are no different from the rest of us. If the rest of us can be brought before a magistrate court and have our fate determined as to whether we are fined or we are sent up to prison to, stay at, well, in our case, stop from prison at the expense of the state, or as guests of the state, then, if a magistrate can make those decisions in relation to the rest of us, why is it that the politicians should be singled out and given favorable treatment, and why is it that they're too good to come before a magistrate? The magistracy has a lot of powers. They can interfere with a person's liberty, and I don't think that you can go any further than that. Well, maybe, life, sentencing someone to death is a bit much of a stronger power. But the point I'm making is that if the magistrate court is good enough for the rest of us, then it is good enough for the politicians. Because at the end of the day, politicians are not better than any person. They are equal. They're not gods. We come from societies that see politicians like gods. And at the end of the day, you're elected to office. Before you were elected, you were an ordinary person, just like anybody else. The fact that you are elected doesn't turn you into some god or somebody who is higher than the law. So I would say that the powers of the DPP, as it relates to criminal prosecutions for treating elections offences, these powers are no different as they exist in all the cases. The DPP has a power to nolly pros basically any criminal case. The DPP can take over any criminal case. As to whether the DPP should take over a criminal case and nolly pros it, that's a different question. There are various factors that have to be determined. But this treason case is something of tremendous public interest because it is an issue. Persons have been complaining about it. In certain countries, persons have been protesting, crying about it, and it affects a lot of persons. It affects the fate of a country. So, I think that it's such an important issue that it definitely should be ventilated through the courts. So although the DPP has the power to nolly pros any criminal case, I don't think that this is an appropriate situation for a nolly pros.
Okay, wonderful. Now, I have a question, and we have a 10-minute period where I want us to discuss this quickly because I want at around 9:30 to open our telephone lines to invite some calls from our audience. And I want to direct it first to Jackie, and then the rest of the panel can chime in on it as well. Jackie, you mentioned earlier the imbalance of power in an election. You made special reference to Grenada. But my question to you is, in an election campaign, how do you fault a political party, for example, for being able to create the context and find the funds that it needs to run their campaign, as compared to another political party who is not able to do that? Because of course we know, history shows us that the party that has the most money and the most resources, they usually win the election. But how do you fault a political party for that? For being able to be proactive and get the resources that they require, because of course the whole intention is to get into office to run the country.
Yes, no, that's a really good question. I think there's actually two different programs going on here, isn't there? There's one that all the other speakers are dealing with, which is this particular case that's happened in Dominica, and very technical stuff about what the magistrates can do and what they can't do. And I know nothing about that. I'm concerned about this idea that it is possible to buy in elections because there's this imbalance of power and imbalance of financial resources, whatever way it comes, whether it's flying in artists, whether it's putting the food trucks on the street, whether it's giving people galvanized, or whether it's being able to pay for companies like Cambridge Analytica, which will cost millions. I'm more concerned about that. And the only way to deal with that is to have legislation like we have in our Political Parties Election Referendum Act, which actually limits, parties have to be able to say where their money's coming from and what are they spending. And that's got to be evidenced. And the Electoral Commission, or whatever your equivalent is in Grenada and the region, ought to have the powers to be able to scrutinise that spending. But at the moment, to go back to your question, you're absolutely right. Why shouldn't somebody, throw largesse at an election if they've got it? Because there's no law prohibiting them from doing that, of course, except they're doing this thing called treating, which I know nothing about, or they're doing, or it's bribery. But at the moment, unless you can prove corrupt intent, there doesn't appear to be too much of a problem, except for, as Cara says, there is a problem if you take away all this stuff about what the magistrates, indeed this one, that one can do. There is a problem because it is actually impacting on people's lives. And you could find in the current, when we were all growing much money around and political parties probably had more equity of power, but there are two issues. The way party or the way governments now run, particularly in the region where the economies are built very much around foreign investment, CBI programs, etc. It means that you have money in the economy or circulating somewhere that may not be part of what I'd call your treasury funds. And I'm not necessarily saying that it goes into someone's pocket or bank account or under their bed, but it's, it's money that's there. And so you as the incumbent may well have access to that and can do all sorts of things with that lesser parties won't have access to. And those lesser parties, if they were by dint of some miracle able to get into government, they may do the same thing. So I'm not making a specific comment about any specific organisation. Whoever is in power at the moment in Grenada or Dominica or Central Trinidad, it's going to be very difficult to move unless you almost have a people's uprising based on the issues, but the issues aren't being discussed. Because as I said earlier on, people are more focused on their immediate needs, and in countries where there is still a lot of poverty. And I always think it's an interesting one because Grenada in particular has a hugely intelligent population. I posit that on the benefits that came from the revolution opening up education. So you pull people aside and you have a really detailed, structured political argument and discussion with them. But when on the street, that's not what happens. On the street, people are concerned about, are they going to get their roof fixed, their piece of window, or the pot of food? And we can't, if that's where we're at, then it is possible, I think, to determine the outcome of an election. And I want to see more discussion about that. I think the treating case in Dominica is interesting. If you're a lawyer, you're going to get really excited about it because it raises a multiple of issues in terms of civil rights and access to justice and the equity of arms between the populace and the governance. So it's interesting. But there is another issue that we ought to be discussing, and maybe it's a separate program, and I'll be happy to come back and discuss it. How do we ensure that younger parties, newer parties that don't have access to millions of pounds because, they don't have the contacts, and you said, why not use your contacts and your nous if you've got it? How do you have a relatively level playing field? And of course, you're never going to have an entirely level playing field. I don't think that happens anywhere in the world, even with the rules about spending. As I said, there's ways around it. But what we're seeing in the region is definitely a disproportionate ability to be able to use your largesse in terms of funding individuals with house repairs, putting on the parties, flying in the artists, and it does. And if the stuff like money in T-shirts and so is real, I don't know if that's real. I got some T-shirts. There's no money in the ones I got, but if that really does happen, then we've got a big problem, haven't we? We've got a big problem because people in poorer societies are very convincible by very small things. And I want to be careful. I'm being a bit hesitant. I'm certainly not saying that people are stupid or people are greedy or selfish and they're only thinking about today and not thinking about the long term and the next 5 years. But I think the level of political debate I've seen in Grenada in particular, but also in other Caribbean islands, is very low. And when you have such low political discourse, there's no major media, really. I know, Godfrey, you're trying to do your thing, and there's, one or two interesting outlets that I'm seeing on social media, but we don't have a detailed investigative thing that really does hold ministers to account. I think politicians in Grenada, of all types and of all parties, get away with murder. Nobody's following them around. And I live in the UK, and here you can't step out your front door without a journalist wanting to find out what you're doing, what you had for breakfast, and where did your money come from. And that's how people get caught out. But we don't have that. So if we don't have that, we're going to have to find some sort of solution so that what we do end up with is fairer than what we've got at the moment. I don't think that it is fair.
Okay.
And can I just add, can I just add one point? I'm not necessarily saying that you end up with the wrong person in power. That's a separate thing. What I'm simply saying is that a person who has the resources is the one that's going to get in. I'm not getting involved in whether that's the right person or the wrong person. That's a separate discussion. I'm simply saying that the people with the power and the money are very, very likely, unless you have some real radical, significant uprising, they're very, very likely to keep on winning elections.
Okay, Cara, you want to come in here? Mm-hmm.
Yes. I just want to lend support to a point that Jackie made, which is that, there is a connection between treating and campaign financing, because at the end of the day, the question is, where do you get all of this money to treat? Where do you get all of this money to throw these lavish concerts? Not just one, not just two, but sometimes we see about, 4 or 5 foreign artists being brought into the country at election times. Where do you get this money when you don't have the money to do other things, which are much more needed? Perhaps repair the roads or give scholarships and so on. So, in countries where you have a CBI program, or you have, certain exposure to foreign investors, then, that problem becomes especially strong or especially serious. Because what I fear, and I don't want to make any accusations against any particular government, what I fear in the region is that we are vulnerable, we are very vulnerable to foreigners and to being exploited. I mean, I don't want to be prejudiced or xenophobic or anything like that, but we do not want a situation where at election times, foreigners can, pour a lot of money into a particular political party to ensure that this political party wins the election. And during the 5th term, that political party somehow feels indebted to that foreign influence. And you don't want a situation where that political party goes as far as doing things like giving all construction contracts or major construction contracts to foreign contractors. And, the monies that are supposed to be fueling the local economy get sent elsewhere. And you have, local contractors who are quite capable just being unemployed. You have young persons rather than working with the local contractors, learning the trade, end up sitting on the roadside smoking, turning to crime and all of that. So, this treating that happens at election times, it might seem like a nice party, where everything is nice. People might enjoy it for a time, but you need to sit and think and just analyze exactly what is happening and to just be conscious. We need to be conscious of the real effects, the far-reaching effects of these things. So I don't think that it's okay to spend a lot of money and have all these lavish campaigns using monies for foreigners, because I think it has very far-reaching effects on the larger population. So yes, I just want to highlight that, because I don't know whether the average person, the man on the streets, I don't know whether they're fully aware of that, whether they realize that the reason why they may not have as good enough a healthcare system or an education system, is because the persons who are supposed to provide them with that just don't care, because they don't have enough respect for them. They know that once election time comes and they can give them a little this, give them a little that, make them feel good for the year, then they will get back into power. Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask.
Thank you, Cara. Ruggles and Mr. Layne. Earlier, Jackie mentioned for example, the incumbent party in power. They more than likely are going to remain because they may have funds from different places. My question, Mr. Ferguson, state resources. Is it proper for a political party to use state resources? For example, a political party in power, is it okay for them to use state resources in their political campaign?
Well, the simple answer is no, Godfrey. There is a distinction between the party and state.
Mm-hmm.
So the party forms the government, but the government is a government for all, and of course the party is partisan. But in an election, and that's the nature of elections, that people, either parties present themselves or individuals present themselves to be elected. And in our system, we have 15 constituencies, and the party, well, I'm speaking of Grenada here. I think Dominica is about 21, Cara, about 21. Yes, but the party that wins the most constituency seats forms the government. And and then you have the cabinet appointed and so. So that's really what our system is. So elections, and it's no accident that everybody spends at election time. That's where everybody focuses their energy, because it's about determining who runs the country for the next 5 years. What is important, as I always advocate, even with programs like these, is that the whole issue of people's involvement cannot be limited to elections and participating in elections, and after elections, then that's it until the next election. And what you need are strong institutions in society that can that can advocate during that period. You know, NGOs, community organizations, and you know, we fail many times to recognize that the important role individuals play or are supposed to be playing in a democracy, and the institutions participating. Too many times people rely on either the government or the opposition party to do things. So people find that the government not doing enough, the opposition party not doing enough, and people criticize, not recognizing that in your own way, in your own organization, whatever organization that you belong to, you can play an important role in making a difference in the lives of people. And it comes about as a result of education, and I'm not speaking about formal education here, but really educating people about government and encouraging people to be involved, not just election time, but throughout the 5-year period. And I just want to respond to a point that Jackie made, and I think in truth and in fact, important points, but that's looking now at the alternative in terms of how you regulate spending, for example, and she gave the example of the UK. But I want to make the point that treating is not a new offense. Treating has always been there, in fact, for centuries, because treating is intended to remove what is referred to as corrupt practices. And our representation of the People Act is modeled a lot after the UK, in a sense. But I think the critical issue coming out of the CCJ's decision and the Dominica case, but I don't think we can lose sight of it, is in effect it means that a member of the public, and most likely it would be a member of an opposing political party, whether in relation to a ruling party candidate or an opposition candidate, can bring an action, can go into the magistrate's court, file a summons, right, a private complaint, and institute, as was done in Dominica, institute proceedings that can ultimately lead to an elected member not being an elected member, right, through the criminal process route. Because there are other routes. And Cara, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but isn't it the situation in Dominica too, that you can, without the criminal process, there's a parallel process by way of election petition, and under an election petition, you can bring the same evidence before a high court, and then the high court can make a determination whether that person, by way of, and this is by way of the civil election petition route, and that has traditionally been used for centuries, that when you are challenging an election, that you challenge it by way of election petition. I have not known, and again I'm subject to correction here, anybody being convicted of treating. In a sense, it's like criminal libel, the argument about criminal libel and civil libel. Because the argument against criminal libel is that if you could go and report to the police about something that somebody says, and then you can be charged criminally for that, then that will have a chilling effect on freedom of speech. However, for the same fact circumstances, you can go before the High Court in a civil claim and get compensation, establish a case of defamation and get compensation. So I just refer to that parallel to say, listen, it is not that there is no alternative in relation to treating, as I understand it, because you can then, by way of election petition, bring before the High Court election offenses committed, which can ultimately disqualify somebody from sitting in Parliament.
Okay, so we wanna engage some of our callers. Let's go to a telephone line. It has been going for a while. Release it. Good evening.
Yes, good evening, Citizen Augustine. I trust that all your participants, they can hear me. Can they all?
Yes, I think they are.
Very well, let's go. Now, I must indeed commend you two on this excellent program this evening, Mr. Augustine. And to listen to the input, especially from the attorney from the UK, working out of the UK, and also from Dominica. Not that I don't appreciate what the others have said. But listen to this. What has been expressed is that there's a difference. What occurs in Dominica, similarly, what occurs in the United Kingdom as it relates to these electoral matters, or matters as infractions in the electoral process. And to that end, while I seek clarity, as I seek deeply to find out why these things differ, I ask the following question of the two foreign, if I were to say, attorneys. One, to Miss Shillingford from Dominica. Can you tell me, ma'am, or tell us, should I say, if in your country you swear allegiance to Her Majesty the Queen, her heirs and successors, and whether your answer be yes or no, can you tell us why? And to Miss, what's her name, McKenzie, is she? Is the other Miss McKenzie?
Yes.
Yes, Miss McKenzie. Can you answer this one? Do you think it's proper, legitimate, democratic, that a country that claims to be a politically independent and sovereign nation state operates under a constitution that has never been legitimized neither by the parliament of said country nor by popular referendum? Do you think this is correct? Thank you very much. Do help me to understand why what is happening in Grenada is in effect happening here. Thank you very much and have a good evening.
Thank you, caller. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, so let's see if we can address them quickly. We want to get some more calls. First, Ms. Shillingford.
Okay, so the question to me was simple, and the answer is no. In Dominica, we do not pledge allegiance to the Queen. It is the Commonwealth of Dominica, so we are a sovereign republic. Our pledge says, before God and all mankind, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the Commonwealth of Dominica and to the sovereign republic for which it stands, etc., etc.
Okay, thank you. Ms. McKenzie?
I'm not 100% sure that I actually understood the question, if I'm honest, but from what I gathered of it, I mean, Grenada's a politically sovereign nation, and I think the caller was concerned that the populace had no involvement in the constitution, either from its origin or from referendum. And I know Grenada had a referendum. I was actually in Grenada for it, and I think people voted against changes to the constitution. I don't remember the detail, whether it was I think all the recommendations were voted down, if I remember right. But so I know there's been attempts certainly at referenda, but I think it's really important, and Ruggles talked about participatory democracy outside of elections. I don't think it even happens at election time, but certainly we ought to be moving towards that and discourse around our governance and around what happens. Our governments have responsibilities, and it's all well and good to say that NGOs and civil society and so ought to do their bit, and of course they do. And in fact, if NGOs and civil society weren't doing their bit, we'd be in real trouble, because they actually supplement quite a lot and fill in a lot of gaps that government failed to do. But I think that we ought to be holding governments of whatever ideology, of whatever colour, whoever's in charge, we ought to be holding them to account much more. And I think one way to do that is through participatory democracy and more discussions like the one that's happening here. But I also think that we do need to look at reform. We have a lot of, Ruggles talked about something being, centuries old. Well, that would have been under, times of empire and colonialism. And, we need to be constantly evolving and looking at things. And in fact, the representation of the People's Act in the UK isn't what determines our spending limits. It's the other piece of legislation that I mentioned, which I have to keep looking at, the Political Parties Elections Referendum Act, which is only 20 years old. It's going to be 21 years old this year. So that's quite modern legislation. And we really ought to be constantly looking at reform and change and discussions and perhaps referendum. I know it's a very expensive process and a very polarizing process, but we need to be doing it. And I don't think that there's a lot of that or enough of that. And I think the caller is probably touching on why are we labouring under some old constitution which we inherited from Whitehall in London. And, but I don't think he's accurate because there has been attempt at referendum.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's go back to a telephone. Release it. Good evening.
Hi.
Yes, good evening, caller.
Oh, Jesus Christ, Godfrey. Come on. This last caller is awful. Anyway, respiratory, yeah? I heard my
Caller, we need to move on. Time is against us. The number 435-2041. We have a few minutes remaining, and we need to getting a few calls as possible. Let's go back to a telephone. Release it. Good evening.
President, good evening.
Yes, good evening, caller.
I would like to know what could be done to parties, leaders that want to remain in power 30 years or more. We have just had an incident in Africa, Uganda to be exact. Now, what could be done with such a situation? Everything is done to prevent the opposition trying to oust the leading party, etc. I hope the lady from England could understand the point that I'm making. What could be done to things like this?
Thank you very much, caller. He's asking about leaders who want to remain in power for many years. Anyone wants to take that one?
Could I just say something on that firstly? Yeah. I mean, Grenada had an attempt in the referendum, didn't they, to limit terms. I can't remember if the terms were for the actual prime ministers or whether they were for the party. I don't remember the exact detail of it. I think if leaders are good and they're delivering and they're lifting people up in a developmental sense, then I'm not so concerned about terms. But I have seen some really dreadful cases around the world of people who are just there forever and a day, and then they put their children in these dynasties around the world. So I'm kind of caught in the middle of the debate where you think some limit is possibly useful because you see quite a lot of abuse. But I think the real measurement has to be, is this person delivering? And if they're delivering, then it doesn't matter how long they're there for. But the question that has to be asked is, are they delivering?
Okay, thank you very much. The telephone number 435-2041. Of course, you can call with your questions or comments. In the meantime, Mr. Layne, you want to come in here? You have not said anything lately, so we need to bring you in. You need to unmute. Mm-hmm.
Ruggles spoke about the treaty legislation being maybe hundreds of years old, and also he mentioned there are very few actions taken under that legislation. To me, therefore, it is really commendable that Ms. Shillingford, as a young attorney and dealing with the gender issue also as a young woman, should have the courage to be involved and to actually lead the charge in a battle as that. And because it takes courage. I think she came up against some very formidable senior attorneys and were able to courageously stand up for them, put a point of view and triumph, you know. And to me, whatever you think about the law, this is to me one of the things that is really heartening to know that you have young people. In fact, I heard her after she did an interview at a local station, and she was making the point that there are a lot of different issues which affects and impact on the rights of our people in the society, treating just being one of them, but many, many issues, and you really need young attorneys, young lawyers who have that kind of mind and who will be willing and prepared. No matter somebody will say to them, when this thing been there a long thing, that's how we always been doing it, you know, that they will say, no, there is another way. And I think that is really, really commendable. I just want to make that point.
Okay, wonderful. I want to ask Cara this though. The fact that the matter was first brought to the court in Dominica, and there was a ruling that the magistrate did not have jurisdiction to hear the case, then to the CCJ, which overturned it. The fact that you had that initial ruling and now that they have to go back to hear the case, can that compromise the outcome of that particular case?
No. I think the facts in this case are not very complicated. You know, these concerts, so all these lavish gatherings were not held in private. They were quite public. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that the delay would have any impact on it. But just something to add to something that Joseph said, you know, thank you for the compliment. But I really think that in our society, we need to challenge things which are wrong more often. And the best way to do that as lawyers, or one of the ways that we can do that, is through judicial review. You know, in judicial review, the courts have the power to look at the actions of the executive where they go wrong, and, you know, to say to the executive that you've done something wrong and that you have to fix it. So, you know, a lot of times people complain, you know, they cry about things, they feel unfairly treated, but they do nothing to challenge it. So I'd just like to encourage our listeners to, you know, stand up for your rights. If you think that your rights are being contravened, you know, visit an attorney and take the necessary steps.
Okay, let's go back to our telephone. Release it. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, caller. Can you turn the volume of your radio or television down, please?
Okay.
Yes.
Can I ask, does the DPP have the power to prevent the government in power to use their money for their party?
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, caller. I think what he's asking is whether or not the DPP can prevent the government in power from using monies for their purposes, like campaign and so. I think I'd asked the question earlier as it relates to using state resources. Ruggles, you can take this one.
Yes, the simple answer is no.
The DPP cannot do that.
No, the DPP cannot do that. What the DPP has the power to do under our constitution is that the DPP can take over matters, can institute matters, can discontinue matters. The DPP has that power. So, for example, if someone files a private criminal complaint, for example, the DPP can take it over and discontinue it. The DPP can institute an action, a criminal action, and the DPP can discontinue it. But the DPP's remit really is in the field of criminal offenses. So it is only if the DPP himself causes a criminal complaint, a criminal matter to be instituted, then, well, that's part of his remit. But the other parts would be taken over and discontinuing. But he can't prevent the DPP's powers do not extend.
Let me ask this as a follow-up, though. If a case of treating is taken to the court, let's say a private citizen takes a matter to the court, a treating matter to the court, would the DPP be the one prosecuting that matter?
No, and that's the point. A private complaint is a private complaint of an individual. So, but the DPP can take it over and prosecute it, or take it over and discontinue it. They can either take it over and continue, or take it over and discontinue.
Now, if let me ask. So, if that happens, if the DPP takes over a matter like that, let's say a case of treating, and discontinues that matter, can the individual move to take it to the Eastern Caribbean Court or the CCJ?
Well, you can. Interesting question, but there are several decisions throughout the region. The DPP is the sole power under the Constitution. It's a constitutional power in our Constitution, Section 71. And therefore, it's difficult, it's not possible substantively to set aside that decision unless there are some, procedural issues at play or so, but because the power is a power under the Constitution. And it's all part of the checks and balances that both Jackie and Cara referred to, because in society it's important to have checks and balances, and that's why you have the separation of powers principle, that the legislature has its role in lawmaking, the executive has its role in policy making, and the courts ultimately at the end of the day is the guardian. The court is the guardian of the Constitution. The court is the one that can quash even a law as being unconstitutional. So the court has that power. And again, I'm happy that Cara mentioned the point, which is a point I always make, that people complain about a lot of things, but people don't take the further step and challenge it. So, for example, there is the avenue under the Constitution that deals with constitutional rights, for example, personal liberty, deprivation of property, freedom of expression, freedom of movement. And the Constitution itself has a vehicle through Section 16 that a citizen can take a matter before the court, challenge something as being unconstitutional as the case may be. And so that, even that aspect probably might be better known. But you can also go by the route that the folks in Dominica did, which is by way of judicial review, which is a supervisory power of the court over public officials. And the judicial review proceedings deal with process. In other words, whether there was natural justice, whether there was any procedural impropriety, whether a decision is irrational. It cannot impose its own decision, but it can quash decisions of public officials on the basis of failure to follow proper process. So there are these tools where the court can restrain either the executive on the one hand, or by striking down laws of parliament as being unconstitutional, either affecting freedom of expression, freedom of association, freedom of assembly, etc. The whole multitude of fundamental rights and freedoms.
Okay, thank you, Ruggles. Actually, we're out of time, folks. It's a pity. I wish this could continue, but I know it's extremely late in England, and I know Jackie probably wants to get into bed. And yes, it is. It's quite late. So,
oh my God, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. It's 3 o'clock in the morning.
So Jackie, I'll give you 30 seconds to make any closing remarks that you'd like to before we go.
Reform. We need reform. Firstly, I'd like to echo what Mr. Layne said, Cara. It's wonderful. I'm just so proud of all these young people doing wonderful things, whether it's political, environmental, law. Brilliant. So long may that continue. But somebody mentioned, about justice and challenging things. And one of the problems we've got in the region is that you can't challenge anything because you can't pay for it. It's very expensive to access justice, and the judicial review is at the pinnacle of expense. So that's something, that's probably another program, Godfrey, but how do people challenge wrongdoing? How do people access their right? How do people access justice when we don't have a proper legal aid system or a way of funding matters that are that affect people's lives, matters that are social and economic or human rights. So I really think that we ought to be having some discussions on that. But in terms of all the other things, one way of dealing with all the other things that we've been discussing today is to actually tightly manage this issue about spending, because I think it's out of control.
All right, thank you very much, Jackie. Cara, of course, we want to thank you very much. We give you 30 seconds to make some closing remarks.
Okay, so thank you again for inviting me. Thank you to my fellow panelists. In closing, I think that there's just one point which I want to make, which is that I know Ruggles mentioned about the petition route, but there are very stringent rules as it relates to election petitions. For example, you must file it within 21 days, and then the court would consider as to whether the evidence you have, whether, let's say, 5 people were bribed, but the party won by 100 votes, whether that would have influenced the outcome of the election. So election petitions in the Caribbean are usually unsuccessful. So I think that, there's use for election offenses, and it's been in our laws for a very long time. It's just that, persons have not utilized it until now. So I know that that Ruggles, he does a lot of public law cases from my knowledge of him in Grenada. So to the Grenadians listening, I just would like to encourage everyone to just, stand up for what is right and not be afraid of any incumbent government or any personal authority, and, just stand for what is right and what is just.
Okay, thank you very much, Cara. Well, Ruggles, I'll give you 10 seconds because you spoke earlier, so I'll give you 10 seconds.
Yes. Well, in the 10 seconds, let this be, and that's why it's important to sensitize people, political parties about it, because I'm sure just the ruling of the court, and I compliment Cara also, that the ruling of the court in a sense will put a check and cause a pause in terms of how elections are approached. And I just can't help this part, Godfrey, and I want to say it on your program, that it's the CCJ. This case, the CCJ is the final court of appeal for Dominica. This case was filed, Cara, in the CCJ in September, I believe. And by March, on March 3rd, there was a very detailed judgment, scholarly judgment, in my view, covering all the areas, looking at the law, not just in the region, but in the wider Commonwealth. And I think it was, commendable that Dominica was able to access the CCJ, of course, staying in Dominica, filing this case, and having it determined within a 6-month period. So we can think about that looking ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Ruggles. So I'm giving the final word to my co-host and my colleague on Your Law and You. And folks, just in case for some reason you didn't know about it, every Monday evening, Mr. Joseph Layne is with me right here on the station, where we do a program called Your Law and You. We discuss all the issues. And let me say this, that this particular program was initiated by Mr. Joseph Layne. He was the one who made the contacts, contacted Jackie, contacted Cara, and made this happen. So I tip my hat to Mr. Layne. I thank you so very much, my brother. And I look forward to many more programs with you. So I give you the final word this evening.
I'll be very brief. Godfrey, just to say thank you to the panelists, to Jacqueline England at this hour, to Cara, and I mentioned already how much I admire what she's doing and her input, to Ruggles, who is always there, doing these programs, doing public education, and of course to you, Godfrey. And I'm glad to play play a very small role in all of this. Thank you, and thank you to all the listeners and the viewers out there.
Right, and just before we go, let me just let you know that we've had quite a number of calls on our WhatsApp platform and Facebook platform asking for a part 2 of this discussion. They're asking for us to look at the issue of bribery and undue influence. It says, please bring them back soon. So this is actually an invitation. So we'll be calling you all again pretty soon. Thank you so very much. It was indeed a pleasure. Jackie, Cara, I thank you so very much. Ruggles, of course, and Mr. Layne, they're always here with me. I thank you so very much. Do have a good night, and we wish you all the best.
Good night. Good
night. Night.
Okay, that's our program this evening, folks. We thank you very much. Sorry we couldn't take as much call as we would have liked to, but nevertheless, it's quite certain we've been able to get quite a bit of information out there. Thank you for staying with us, and we look forward to being with you again tomorrow evening. It will be an open line, so do join us. Do have a good night. All the best.
You under pressure, you under stress, a lot of problem. They on your chest. You under pressure, you under stress, a lot of problem.